telling from our group, which is an extension of having all been together, is the vulnerable place that our deep faith puts us in terms of helping others and opening our hearts in a bigger way, and being grateful to being able to talk with others about those deep feelings. Arthur?
Thank you, Anne. And what I learned from talking to David and Anne is that we have very few days to serve others.
Go forth.
And that's it. Thank you. But it was great. Thank you very much.
Who'd like to go next?
I can go.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I had Lisa, Jessica. Lisa's from LA, Jessica from Maryland, Pammy from Virginia, and Gabriel from DC. And I'm just gonna sum it all up. And like the last report, everybody wanted to talk about vulnerability. And so words that came out were like being overwhelmed, and taking that overwhelmingness to being creative in your response. Right? So what do you do? What's one thing, one purpose that you can do? And we have Jessica, who's a teacher, and she said, well, she created, she works with immigrant kids, and she created a book club where kids can write about their emotions and what they're feeling, you know. And the only challenge with that is only 60% of the kids, because the other 40% don't have access, or the parents aren't educated on technology. So, but she's working on that. And then I learned new words from Lisa from LA about being an interfaith educator. And then Pammy talked about, you know, he thought he could never find something. What can he do now in the sick community? And he found that he can go online and work with adults, and then focus on adult education. And then our word of the day, including, we had Gabriel had some technical difficulty. He's a comedian in DC, and I see him everywhere. But all together, everybody talked about translating good intentions into actions. How do you translate your good intention into actions? And the word of the day is compassion, through compassionate work. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next? That sounded like a very full, robust conversation.
Yes.
Next report out.
Hi, my name is Valeria Vorlandini. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had a group. We were Christopher from Liberia, and then Nahala, that she lives in Virginia, but she's originally Lebanese. And I'm originally from Argentina, and I live in Chevy Chase, Maryland, in Washington, D.C. Our group was very interesting because we tried to discuss COVID and the pandemic in a very broad idea, that how it had affected our emotions and how we felt vulnerable in the work we were doing. So Christopher gave us an idea what they experience every day in Liberia during the lockdown, how the problems of not being able to work, and the children that most of the time help in the task, going to do chores and raising money, that they were not able to go to school or even work for the families. And he's a minister, so he preached, and in his ministry was able to give hope and discuss values and the power of earth and praying. They were not able to give any food or resources to the community, but the word of God helped us in this time of crisis to go through all the uncertainties and the fear and the feeling that they didn't know what's next. But then we discussed quite a lot about the difference between Ebola, that it hit Liberia very, very hard in 2014, that most people didn't believe in Ebola and wouldn't follow the measures, and they had an incredible amount of death, and the crisis was very severe and for a long time. And somehow COVID had not had the same casualties. They didn't experience so many deaths, and people are coping with the measures. So also I discussed with him and Hala the work that I had been doing for Mana Food Center here in Maryland.
Yeah. Thank you for
Hey,
sharing that.
Valeria, good to see you.
Thank you.
Next group. Gale, can I nominate you to do a report out for our group?
Sure, we could definitely use more time to process it even more. There were only 3 of us, including Amber, me, and Jan in the room, but there were so many points of intersection and curiosity that we could definitely have gone on. But I think a theme running through it was, how do we contribute in these times of turmoil? And vulnerabilities we touched on are ones of isolation and disconnection, of confusion, of trauma, and need. So lots of different types of vulnerability, and just trying to brainstorm together what next steps might be, or what even a bigger vision might be.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing. Yeah, it was a fabulous group. Thank you. And it was wonderful to have Gale and of course Amber there. And one of the quotes I said, because we were talking about what was going on with COVID, is, and one of the quotes I thought of is with Martin Luther King, that coming out of this, I felt, was going to be a new day, a new order, that what we were going through with the Floyd, all of the things that are going on with racial discrimination issues and the protests, and that what Martin Luther King said was, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I was stumbling around trying to find it, but that, for me, that says a lot of where ultimately where we will find ourselves.
Thank you, Jan. Are there any other groups that we haven't heard from?
So there was a group with Chuck and Sean and myself, Alex. I don't know if Chuck or Sean want to comment as well, but one thing we discussed, which was very interesting, is what is, Chuck posed the question of what is our inner compass that we sort of follow in how we go about trying to be present to others, serve others. And by that, we discussed that could mean many different things, the inner compass. And it's not just a series of your sort of faith beliefs, but it is also sort of how you learn to listen, that you really need to be vulnerable to those people you would need to serve. And you need to first and foremost hear from them what their needs are and what their perception of their problems or their concerns are, rather than arriving with, ideas about what could be done to help them. So we talked about the emphasis of being open to hearing and listening.
Thank you, Alex. That's a great, I think that's a great segue to just, if you'll indulge me, just to make a few kind of closing remarks as we begin to wrap up, and then I'll hand this back over to Anne. I want to thank all of you for participating, to David and to Jackie and Fazia for sharing the work that you're doing, the personal not just intention, but the personal reservoir that you draw from to guide you through navigating the different challenges that you face in these uncertain times. I think that listening to the report outs, there are some kind of intersecting themes about trying to make sense of where we are in the world, and also recognizing the value of finding community and creating connection and learning from one another. I think that we are, as a nation and frankly as a world, grappling with that way forward. And I appreciated the opportunity to hear from three folks who are dedicating time and energy and thoughtfulness about how to, in their space immediately in front of them, how they can affect change. I often think about Howard Thurman, the theologian, who describes the power of the 3 feet around him. I learned of that and learned of him from some interviews that I did, in which it was that inspiration that prevents hopelessness and paralysis. And given where the country is today, and given the phenomenal need that exists in all of us and in our communities, I think that there is something incredibly powerful about listening and learning and finding inspiration from each other. And so I want to thank the Interfaith Conference for Metropolitan Washington for facilitating and bringing us together. I know, at least in our small group, we were just getting started. I think we could have talked for another 25 minutes. And I suspect by the smiles on many of your faces that you also found that. And so I hope you'll take a moment to use the chat features to share your contact information if there are folks that you want to reach out to and be in contact and be in constant communication with, because I think it moves it forward. I also want to invite you to listen to the program that we host. It's inspired, produced by Interfaith Voices. It's available as a podcast. This week, we talk specifically about protest and the power of people and how we create community and find new rituals to connect. It is not only, we not only look at the events of the last 10 days around the protests around the racial, it kind of calls for racial justice. But we also look at a way that the United Methodist tradition has resuscitated the love feast as a way of creating community. And I think that creating spaces to listen and find how faith is inspiring how we move forward is, at least for me, something that keeps me going. And I suspect, because we are all here together, it holds us as well. So I'm going to now say thank you and pass it back over to Anne.
Thank you so much, Amber. And you did such a lovely job of pulling things together at the end that you've made my last few minutes here very easy. So I just want to again thank our speakers, those of you who so graciously agreed to share about your experiences and perspectives and work that you do every day in service to those most vulnerable. And Amber, you moderated such a lively and thoughtful dialogue, and it transitioned so smoothly to our small group breakout rooms, which seem to have generated a lot of lovely community building and connection and sharing and hopefully enriching one another. So I appreciate everyone who joined today. And you'll be receiving from us shortly a follow-up email, and we ask that you please take the follow-up survey so that we can get some feedback from you about this program and other programs that you might be interested in the future. I would like to offer just a closing interfaith prayer. It's very short, but this was written by a group, an interfaith group in Montgomery County that does a lot of advocacy work together. And I've used this in many contexts, and I want to close us out today with it because I think it's really quite appropriate. Holy One, We ask you by all your beautiful names and attributes to hear our prayer. We ask you to lead us to hearing the truths lived by many different faith traditions, which may help us to find the universal source of love. We ask you that you enable us to live by the true teachings of our sacred texts, that we be worthy of being called Muslim, Sikh, Jew, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Zoroastrian. Holy One, we ask you through all of these faiths to bring our hearts together in true friendship, that you make us all a light unto the world, that we may shine love, healing, justice, and peace upon all of the vulnerable places and people we encounter. Amen. Peace to you all. Thank you again for joining us. Hope to see you again at another event.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jackie.
Amazing.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a great afternoon.